Coming to duty ethics, now as the name implies, each person has some moral duties to perform. Okay, so there are some duties that should be performed. Moral duties, we can say it as moral duties. So performing the moral duties is very important, regardless whether this act of performing the moral duty do most good to others or not. That is called as duty ethics. Always a person has to perform moral duties. Example is mentioned here: duty to treat others fairly, not to injure others. Okay, whether it is going to produce most good to most of the people or not, that is secondary. My primary thing is I have to follow all the moral duties. I have to perform all the moral duties that are assigned, that I know, that has been given. That is called as duty ethics. In duty ethics also we have two versions. One is called Kant's theory. The other one is called John Rawls' modern theory of duty ethics. Kant's theory and duty ethics. Sorry, John Rawls' theory. Kant's theory, the same. Moral duties are fundamentals rather than good consequences. Whether it is going to produce most good to most of the people or not, that is secondary. I have to perform all the moral duties. That is the fundamental thing that I have to do, performing moral duties. And he listed the following duties as ethical actions. That is being mentioned here. Being honest, all these are the moral duties, moral principles that we have to follow, and they are called as ethical actions. They are considered as ethical actions. Whether it is going to produce most good to most of the people or not, I have to simply follow the moral duty. Being honest, we should not cause suffering to other people. We should be fair to others. We have to show gratitude for their kindness. Okay, we should not commit suicide, develop one's own talents, etc. So few duties are mentioned here. So according to Kant, what he says is, if we perform these duties are called, these are the ethical actions that we have to perform. These are the duties or moral principles that we have to perform. And whenever we perform these moral duties, definitely we can express respect for each and every human being. Okay, and these moral principles are also called as universal principles. Always everybody should follow all these moral duties so that we give respect to each and every human being. Now,
Excuse me, ma'am.
yes, ma'am.
Ma'am, one doubt, ma'am. In the first point, they have given moral duties or fundamentals rather than good consequences. They have mentioned, no, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
That means, ma'am, whenever we are following these moral duties, automatically.
Definitely. It results in good consequences only. But here, what they mean by this good consequences, whether it is going to produce most good for most of the people or not, we need not worry, because that is the statement given in utilitarian theory. Most good to most of the people, right?
Okay.
That is what is meant here. Whether it produces most good to most of the people or not. See here.
That means some flaws will there means there is no problem. We have to avoid.
Yes. Though it is not going to produce, that is, it is against act utilitarian. That's what. Simply, if you have to follow the moral duties, basic moral duties that each and every human being has to perform. It has to be followed. It is not necessary that it is producing, it is that particular act is doing most good or not. Okay.
Okay.
This is what is meant by good consequences here. Definitely, when we follow moral duties, indirectly all good consequences only will happen, but it doesn't mean that it is going to produce good consequence for most of the people. Many of the people are going to be get benefited or not. That is secondary in this case. Okay, following moral duty is the fundamental thing. even most people are not going to get benefited by that particular action. We have to simply follow the moral duties. Is it clear, Teja? Am I confusing you?
No, ma'am. No, ma'am. Clear only, ma'am.
So, to put in a simple way, what we can say is this Kant's theory of duty ethics, it states that any action that respect each human being as a moral agent. Okay, any action that respect each human being as a moral agent is considered to be a right action. Okay, and it emphasizes that it gives more importance to performing moral duties. So according to this theory, we can say that performing moral duties and treating each person as a moral agent, giving respect to all, is more important when compared to what is good for society as a whole. That is what is meant here. Whether it is going to produce most good for the society, for most of the people, for the society as a whole, that doesn't matter. But anyway, we have to perform all our moral duties, moral principles. That is the basic concept of Kant's theory, performing moral duties. Coming to John Rawls' theory, let's quickly watch a video about this John Rawls theory and come back to the slide. Just watch this video.
Cindy and Carlos each want the last cookie, so the fair thing to do is to have them split it. But there's a problem. If we ask Cindy to cut the cookie, she'll try to cut a bigger piece for herself. If we ask Carlos to cut the cookie, he'll try to cut a bigger piece for himself. How can we make sure that whoever cuts the cookie, they try to cut it as fairly as possible? The answer is this: whoever cuts the cookie must choose their piece last. If the person doing the cutting doesn't know which piece they'll get, then they will try their best to make sure that the pieces are split evenly. According to the political philosopher John Rawls, this simple example provides an important insight about how to create a fair and just society. The basic idea is that we do our best to ensure fairness when we don't know exactly how we will be affected. Let's apply this idea to choosing laws and economic policies. In order to determine what laws and economic policies are fair and just, we must ask ourselves whether we would choose those policies if we didn't know how they would affect us as individuals. Imagine that you had to choose the rules for society. However, before choosing, you forgot everything about yourself. You don't remember your level of wealth, your social status, your race or ethnicity, your gender or sexual orientation, your religion or values, or even your physical abilities or disabilities. Rawls calls this choosing from behind the veil of ignorance. In such a situation, which laws would you rationally choose? Would you prohibit slavery? What about gay marriage? Would you require a minimum wage? What social welfare programs would you want in place? We might argue about which rules you would actually choose, but the important point here is that in choosing the rules from behind the veil of ignorance, you would do your best to make sure that no one was treated unfairly, because for all you know, that person could be you.
What's your understanding in this? What did you understand from the video? What is John Rawls' theory? See, it deals with framing the moral duties. What duty are considered to be what are the duties are considered as moral duties? How will you frame moral principles? What are the valid principles of duty? How to frame it? That is what is being suggested by John Rawls. What did you understand from the video?
Ma'am, we have to do everything as fairly, ma'am.
How to do everything fairly?
That means without bothering others, ma'am.
Yes. If we have to frame a rule, a moral principle that should be universally accepted by all people. There should not be any discrimination. Right? It should be acceptable by all people, all group, all cadre people within a particular society. So before framing a fair society, before framing a moral principle or valid principles of duty, how it has to be framed is we have to place ourselves in a veil of ignorance. Is it not? That is what is mentioned there in the video. We should with only if we don't know how the rule that we are going to frame will affect us. An simple example was given, right? Sharing a pie between two people. How it is solved in that case?
That after cutting the person who is cutting, he have to take it last, ma'am.
Yes, he has to take the last piece. Only then, that is without knowing how he is going to get affected.
Then he will act accordingly.
Yes, and that solution definitely will be a moral solution, right? It will not affect both the people now. Definitely they will cut the piece very fairly so that they are going to get equal share.
Yes, ma'am. Otherwise,
Yes.
if he will cut favor to him, means the last piece will
He
be.
is going to get a small piece. Right?
So that due to fear, he will do correctly, ma'am.
Very good. That is what is called as veil of ignorance. That is mentioned here in this slide also. We have to place ourselves in an imaginary contracting situation. This is called veil of ignorance. Rawls' theory of veil of ignorance. So before framing the rules, valid principles of duty, one should place himself in an imaginary contracting situation. So and that imaginary contracting situation is called as veil of ignorance, because I am not sure how I am going to get affected by framing that particular rule or moral principle. That is called veil of ignorance. So only if we place a person in an imaginary contracting situation, we can reason more easily and honestly. Otherwise, we will make decision with some bias. Okay. This veil of ignorance concept helps us to set aside our bias and frame rules so that it can be universally accepted by all groups of people in a particular society. That is called as John Rawls' theory of duty ethics. So those principles has to be framed if we want to have a fair society. Is it clear what is duty ethics? Rawls' theory speaks about framing the moral duties, how moral duties are framed. And Kant's theory, it speaks about performing the moral duties. Whether it results in producing most good to most of the people or not. Of course, it will produce good consequence, but even though it is not going to produce most good to most of the people, I have to follow all the moral duties that is being listed here. Only then my action is said to be right. Okay, that is called as Kant's theory of duty ethics. And John Rawls' theory, it gave us an insight about how to frame a fair society, how to frame the valid principles of duty. by placing oneself in an imaginary contracting situation, and that is called as veil of ignorance. If we don't know what is going to happen to us in that particular situation, what will be the decision that I will take? So without knowing how I'm going to get affected, I have to frame a fair, valid principles of duty or fair moral duties that can be accepted universally by all the people under a particular society. That is called as John Rawls theory.